Dear listener, hello. Well, they say you never forget your first radio station, that is, and for me, that's absolutely true. On the 25th of January 1997, I walked in the doors of 5AA, a talkback station in Adelaide. It was then owned by Paul Thompson and DMG, which went on to create the Nova network. So I had the best luck of all time having that as my first radio station. And I spent a long career at DMG, and 5AA really holds a special place in my heart. And it's 50 years old this week. It's their 50th birthday celebration. So I thought we'd catch up with station manager Craig Munn. G'day, Munny. How are you?
I'm good, Wade. Yourself?
Very well. It's been a long time. How long have you been at AA?
It has been a long time. We did cross paths my first time round and worked together.
Yes.
I'm not sure I want to say exactly how long ago that was, but being with the station now, station manager in my 13th year. So came back in 2013. So and time, I must say, time has gone remarkably quick. This last decade, I'm sure most people would say the same. That sort of has worked in our media landscape. It's been a bit of a blur these last few years. That's for sure.
That's for sure. So AA, for those outside of Adelaide, there is something special about it. I think it's so much entwined with the fabric of Adelaide. And I know like radio stations love to say that they're local and love to put local in their marketing, but I don't think I've ever been at a station that is more local than AA. What do you think is the secret of longevity and success at AA?
Yeah, I think that's a really relevant point. I'm sure every city speaks to how parochial and how passionate they are about their own people, their own city. AA, I think, and again, I'm biased here. Clearly, I do think we're a little bit crazy by our own admission. I think in terms of where we sit geographically in Australia as a city, the size of our city, we very much try to play above our weight, so to speak. You only have to hear that in the commentary, not just in our radio station, but in our city. And I think 5AA definitely, and with pride, certainly pushes that as hard as anyone. We're lucky in a talk radio environment in that you have time to really flesh out your passion points. And I know you're familiar, but for the audience that aren't, we certainly a feature of our station has been our drive show, been a sport program, and the only one in Metro Australia that's been able to be that the entire time of talk radio, where from 4 o'clock we forget about all of the news cycle of the day and step into that sport space. And I think I've used this analogy in other places before. I think a lot of people will speak about Adelaide often as the ultimate country town, and whilst we certainly think we're more urban than that, and I think certainly in the last few years that certainly is the case. If you do visit a country town, once you get past the news cycle, once you get past the weather, you'll go straight to the local sporting teams and their performances. And I think that really does sort of encapsulate Adelaide and where 5AA sits within that.
Yeah, absolutely. I still remember, I can vividly remember sitting in the studio paneling when KG was interviewing Malcolm Blight after the 97 grand final win.
Yep.
He came in and took calls for an hour. I mean, in the era of podcasting, that might not seem so unique to people, but in those days, pretty much you just got people for phone interviews most of the time.
Yep.
And I think if I remember rightly, I mean, KG, as you know, we'll talk about him in a minute.
Yeah.
He doesn't do anything by half measures. He was crying during that interview because it meant so much to the city. And I always think that AA has the barometer, a bit like 3AW in Melbourne, has the barometer and the beating heart of the city. And sport is the ultimate thing. Now, for people listening, I got a feeling they might know Kane Corns.
Yes. Yep.
But pre-Kane, there was another Corns,
yes.
Graham Corns. Cornsy and KG were kind of like having another breakfast show, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And a couple of things to that. I think it's worth noting, and we spoke to this when celebrating our 50th birthday on the weekend. Graham's been in some shape or form part of our radio station for 38 of those 50 years. And what is not spoken about, I don't think it's spoken about enough, is the first 3 years that Graham was the coach of the Adelaide Crows in our city, 1991 to 1993. He was the 5AA breakfast co-host with Ken Dicken, who was a fantastic broadcaster. Unfortunately, no longer with us. And when you put it in that context of today, and make no mistake, AFL football in our city in the early 90s was as big as it is anywhere still today. To have an AFL coach broadcasting from 5:30 in the morning till 9, then going down to the footy club and managing 50 footballers, it's quite an incredible story. He only stopped with us when he actually got an extension of his contract with the Crows in 1993. Unfortunately for Graham, he only did survive one more year as a coach, but fortunately for the station, he stepped into to our lineup again, this time as part of the drive show with KG Cunningham, and so and I think to your point, I think most people have heard of KG in some shape or form. We're so proud to have the Adelaide Oval Media Centre named in his honour. Next year, he will celebrate his 50th year in media. I know you've done some work in other places trying to get him in the Hall of Fame, for which I think is more than worthy. So, to your point, it was a show that definitely resonated with people that don't normally listen to a talk radio station. And again, I've said this in other places. The amount of interns and work experience students, that come through the building over the years, and inevitably I'll ask them at the beginning, with no judgment here, what's your knowledge of 5AA? And they'll quite honestly say that, I don't know a hell of a lot of it, but I used to listen in the back of the car with my dad, KG and Cornsey. You would just hear that over and over and over, to the point where our Premier, Peter Malinauskas, called in to the Saturday sports show this weekend for our 50th, and confirmed, and again, he said it at our dinner last week, he started listening to 5AA through KG and Cornsey as a teenager, listening to their drive show. He now makes sure that he on Saturday mornings, the first thing he does is he put KG and Cornsey on. And so again, I think we are a station that's been connected to the captains of industry in our city, but equally too, we are a radio station, like all good talk stations, that are a sound and a noise for so many people in the suburbs that need that companionship, whether they be at home late at night or driving in their cars and wanting to connect and speak, both to the radio and at the radio, depending on what we're saying at any given time.
Yeah, and depending on who's on. I used to love sitting outside the glass to the late Bob Francis, who I think, again, in a Sydney or Melbourne, he would have been a megastar, but in Adelaide, he was big for Adelaide, and his national fame didn't really kind of translate. But what I used to love was, and I distinctly remember him saying, when the callers would ring up and have a go at him for something, because, he'd have one every 5 calls would have a go at him, someone saying, oh, you're not a proper journalist. And he took great offense. He was like, I'm not a journalist. I'm an entertainer.
Yeah.
You've had a range of entertainers. You've had the sports entertainers. You've had Bob, but also Baz and Pilko, I think, where we first encountered each other. I was paneling the breakfast show with Baz, and you were the executive producer. Those guys were entertainers first. Radio was just kind of the delivery mechanism,
that's
right?
exactly it. And I think, again, I think 5AA has always been slightly unorthodox in the way that we've put together our lineup. And I couldn't agree more, Wade. I think at the heart of what we've tried to do, as distinct to perhaps looking for a format or looking for a shock jock or someone to inflame the audience, I think in our city, that entertainment value, and you only got to look at, I guess, over the whole journey, which radio stations have performed the strongest in our city. It has always been led by the personalities. And, I think starting out, if you like, we've obviously had various ownership, and we've had various formats across the way. But when the station really did start to hit its straps, when we were able to not broadcast horse racing or the greyhounds or the trots in the mid-90s, the roll call of personalities in our city that the station has in some shape or form, and not just necessarily holding down key slots, but being key contributors to the radio station. I think it's a real feature. To your point around Bob, I got not a doubt in my mind that in any city in the world that Bob had brought his radio program, he would have made a noise, and he was an original in every respect. And he fiercely protected that he was not a journalist, he was a broadcaster, and nothing triggered him more than that. But Bob, as you know yourself firsthand, Bob was able to just speak to so many different people in so many different ways. And we had youngsters ringing in trying to prank him. We had so many people that requested audio at their funerals, celebrating their lives. They wanted audio from Bob played as a backdrop, which I think just speaks to the power of both talk radio widely, but also our station in our city.
Yeah, and comedy has actually found a place on 5AA over the years. I think you know where I'm going here. Behind Closed Doors was one of those iconic benchmarks, and for those that didn't hear it, it was literally a satire of the radio station itself on the radio station. So very talented guy, John Blake, would do a lot of voices, and it became one of those benchmarks that, you released a lot of CDs for charity. There was a lot of things that went behind that, but I still remember how funny that was. And the fact that on a talk radio station at breakfast time, there was entertainment and it was at the expense of the radio station itself was just gold.
Again, John, in any city, would have performed that role on any show and been a star. We had John with us only up until 2 years ago. What he did, I think, which was so powerful, was, as you said, the primary source of his comedy was to poke fun at the radio station, and to never take ourselves too seriously. And I think that was what actually brought our audience significantly closer, because he didn't just keep it to within the confines of the breakfast show he worked on. Every person that interacted with the station was up for grabs, from the Prime Minister down, and his ability to do voices and also just a cleverness around the message that he was delivering. The people, to your point around our CDs, they would sell out every year because two things: it was for a good cause, but also it was genuinely funny radio that people could play back at their leisure. I think too. Our radio station, whilst we would poke fun at ourselves, we also have been really good at speaking for the battler. And the reason why I raise that is that Blakey would be very keen to mimic people like Leon Biner, like Bob, like Keith Conlon. And I think the one common thing that those guys all had, and it definitely led to our success through the 2000s for that 15 years, was a real care for the audience. And I think that was demonstrated in just the shows that people listened to and what they heard daily.
Yeah, and finally, I'm glad you mentioned Leon, because he was a stalwart at AA for over a couple of decades. And talk about unorthodox. He was a music presenter that did talk. He used to phone into talkback, putting on voices, and then became one of the most iconic voices on AA, and really was the pulse of Adelaide mornings for a long period of time. Only sadly passed away very recently. Any thoughts on Leon?
Yeah, he did. And Leon, 21 years as a morning talk presenter, speaks for itself. I think when Leon unfortunately passed, Paul Thompson, and I'm sure you obviously know Paul really well. Paul was so instrumental in helping Leon establish himself as making that transition from DJ, if you like, an old school 70s, 80s DJ to a 90s and 2000s talk broadcaster. Paul was really influential in helping him understand, I think, the key reasons why people listen to a talk radio station. But again, Leon was someone that he genuinely enjoyed seeing results for people that, I hate saying the term struggle street, because that just implies that those people are not, they're not economically or even intellectually well off, but our audience is, but they might be going through tough times. And Leon, definitely, the feature of his show was being able to help those people. He really did get every last drop out of himself in terms of staying with the radio station, even though, health issues were a real concern for him. And again, it's often something that's sort of said half-hearted, where, you speak to older, I should say, broadcasters, and they say, I just want to be doing this until I can't. Leon was the very definition of that. And right to the very end, his audience loved him for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And just in tribute to Leon, I'm now going to turn my headphones just underneath my chin, just like that, because I do remember seeing that quite often with a little bit of this. Munny, thank you for joining us. Congratulations on the 50th anniversary. I don't think you ever forget your first radio station, and AA was that for me. So of all the long-term success of all the people that have come before, congratulations, and hopefully you're having a great celebration this week.
Yeah, thank you, Wade. And I think exactly that. We are a funny, unique radio station. Anyone that touches it, anyone that spent time in it, I think would say that it's a place that they really enjoyed interacting with. There's a lot of people here. And again, that is probably, to finish out here, the thing that we are most passionate about. We're still a people-driven organisation. I've got on the programming side, in our program teams, in our newsroom, in our AFL broadcasting, we're around about 40 people that do something here at least once a week. And I think that's something that is our something that we really take genuine pride in. And you were a part of that for a few of those years. And so anyone that has, I think they always speak fondly of their time here. I know for myself, I've been here too many years to remember, but I always do, in all sincerity, take it is a privilege to be part of our radio station, our city. I think it's just a fun place to be, and hopefully it won't be me, but hopefully we'll be here in another 50 years.
You never know, Munny. You never know. You might be.
Oh, I think I do.
Thanks, mate.
No worries. Thank you. Lovely to catch up.
Now, I would love to hear your first radio station stories. We've all got them, good, bad, or otherwise. All you need to do is become a P1. You can jump on our P1 WhatsApp, or you can leave some comments below in the YouTube feed as well if you want, or just shoot me a message on the Instagram. You can find us at The Quarter Hour. What I'd really love to know is, which radio station was it? What were some of the stories and personalities you had around you at the time? And what are some of the lessons you've taken from that first station? Well, it's been another big week on The Quarter Hour. Thanks for joining us. And next week, more fun and games, no doubt. I'll be talking to a lot of international people next week. We've been very Aussie focused because there's a lot going on here, of course. But next week, a lot of radio overseas with a lot of people who are there. And I'll be live from the Potential studio at Radio Days in Europe. So join me again on Monday. See you soon.